Yeah, we back at it again. The pop doesn't stop and the grind doesn't flop. Not even if you call the cops. What up, pimps? The Bidenator is here with Barack and Donnie to continue ranking presidents for your amusement.
Where's my introduction, Joe? What am I, chopped liver? How come I didn't get a shout out?
You don't strike me as a chopped liver kind of guy, George. You strike me more as a collapsed tower sort of guy.
Piss off, fatty.
Jesus, guys, let's continue. Your squabbling isn't doing it for me, not even a half-chub down there anyway. Zachary Taylor was the 12th president. He was also the second president to die in office. He only made it about a year in office. Since we are keeping to what these men did while they were president, I am not counting Taylor's exploits in the Mexican-American War, though it should be noted that this war made him a national hero.
I agree, Barry. No one knows what it was like down there in Mexico. I was slinging it out with the Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. I fought with so many future presidents. I saw James K. Polk. I saw Franklin Pierce, saw Zachary Taylor. It was a dark time, but in the end, we gained California after John Drake Sloat busted out the default Fortnite emote. It was so cringe that many of his own men died that day, but it made Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna surrender. So it was worth the sacrifice.
Jesus Christ in heaven. Joe, I'm scheduling you a doctor's appointment. We're going to go ahead and get that little walnut brain of yours checked out. Anyway, Barry, can you just throw Taylor into D tier? He only had a year in office and didn't really do anything.
Fair enough, I suppose. Who wants to do the next president?
I got this shit, homies. Millard Fillmore became president after Taylor's death and served out the remaining 3 years or so of the term. He signed the Compromise of 1850, which just kicked the can down the road once more on slavery. Though I suppose you could argue that him doing so delayed the Civil War by about a decade, so maybe it was a good thing. Honestly, I don't know. I'm leaning on C tier.
Yeah, I have to agree, George, that Alec Baldwin-looking dude gets C tier. I can't think of anything past the Compromise of 1850.
Yeah, C tier is fair. Moving on to the next president, Franklin Pierce. Our 14th president is up next, fellas. Have you ever heard the tragedy of President Pierce the Sad?
The tragedy of Franklin Pierce? Honestly, I've never heard much about President Pierce. What was the tragedy, Joe?
Not only did Franklin Pierce lose his 2 sons when they were young, but he also had a 3rd son named Benny. The Pierce family, by all accounts, loved Benny, and his mother in particular dotted on him quite fondly, as it were. Franklin Pierce, his wife, and his son Benny were all traveling to Washington, D.C. on account of Franklin being elected president. And unfortunately, on the way to the Capitol, their train car derailed, causing an accident. Pierce and his wife survived with little injury. Unfortunately, their young son, Benny, didn't make it. He was crushed by the train car. Very tragic. I think it was really what pushed Pierce into his drinking, and it definitely affected his presidency, given the rules of our tier list. I just want us to acknowledge the unfortunate tragedy that befell the Pierce family. Regardless, though, he wasn't a great president. But honestly, the accident is probably why I give Franklin Pierce a D tier.
Very sad kind of sniffling, poor little Benny. Though I got to mention, Joe, it's quite astounding that you spoke for a minute straight without fumbling the bag. Quite impressive.
Upshut, Donald, I speak perfectly fine. Wrong, nothing is with speech. Oh gosh, anyone else smell pennies?
I don't smell pennies, Joe, but I do smell dog shit, because our next president is James Buchanan. The man who goes into D tier. He's sometimes regarded as the worst president we've ever had. That's not my opinion. I don't think he's the worst. But I definitely think he's bottom 3 or 4 presidents for sure. He did nothing when the South started to secede. If anything, he just sort of taunted them. He also said that the South had no right to secede. But then he also said the federal government couldn't stop them. That's some baloney on a pony right there, D tier, only because he has some decent drip, that's all.
Agreed, Barack. Gosh, we are so on fire today. It's starting to chub up my little Donnie. And I think I'm about to get even more bricked up because the next president is Abraham Lincoln, probably our greatest president ever. Bite me if you disagree for nonsense reasons. Please learn history. The Civil War was fought over slavery. You can pee, you can shit, you can cry, you can yell. Nothing will ever change the fact that the South seceded from the Union because they wanted to keep slavery alive. There is no debate on this. Please go read all the secession letters. And if you still aren't convinced because you're literally lying to yourself, let's have Mr. George W. Bush read you the cornerstone speech. George, could you please go ahead and quote the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Hamilton Stevens?
I hope you enjoy my sweet, succulent voice, Chads, because I'm about to quote a lot of shit from the Vice President of the Confederacy. You can look this up yourself if you'd like, and I quote, "Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in the various departments of science. It has been so even amongst us. Many who hear me perhaps can recollect well that this truth was not generally admitted, even within their day. The errors of the past generation still clung to many as late as 20 years ago. Those at the North who still cling to these errors with a zeal above knowledge we justly denominate fanatics. All fanaticism springs from an aberration of the mind, from a defect in reasoning. It is a species of insanity. One of the most striking characteristics of insanity in many instances is forming correct conclusions from fancied or erroneous premises. So with the anti-slavery fanatics. Their conclusions are right if their premises were. They assume that the Negro is equal, and hence conclude that he is entitled to equal privileges and rights with the white man. If their premises were correct, their conclusions would be logical and just, but their premise being wrong, their whole argument fails. I recollect once of having heard a gentleman from one of the northern states, of great power and ability, announce in the House of Representatives with imposing effect that we of the South would be compelled ultimately to yield upon this subject of slavery, that it was as impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics or mechanics, that the principle would ultimately prevail, that we, in maintaining slavery as it exists with us, were warring against a principle founded in nature, the principle of the equality of men. The reply I made to him was that upon his own grounds we should ultimately succeed, and that he and his associates in this crusade against our institutions would ultimately fail. The truth announced that it was as impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics and mechanics, I admitted, but told him that it was he and those acting with him who were warring against a principle. They were attempting to make things equal which the Creator had made unequal. Unquote. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up.
Exactly, George. Thank you for spending time to read that portion of the speech. So yeah, the Confederate government was formed to protect slavery. Lincoln hated slavery, but didn't think he could do anything about it yet, and fought the Civil War under the pretext of preserving the Union until the right time came to give the Emancipation Proclamation, changing the reasoning of the war, and eventually winning it all with the help of some very intelligent people, like Ulysses S. Grant. We all know what happens next, of course, the Reconstruction period, though Lincoln would never see it. He was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln died in the early hours of April 15, 1865. A tragedy, honestly, because I truly believe if Lincoln had stayed alive his second term, I argue the conditions in the South would have greatly improved. S tier for Abraham Lincoln. He kept the country together and took a bullet for his troubles. Very unfortunate. S tier, greatest president.
Lincoln wasn't perfect, and he has very valid criticisms one could lay on him. But it is our definitive belief he is tied with George Washington for being the best president we've ever had. And he goes into S tier. Now on to Andrew Johnson, F tier. Let's honestly just skip this clown F tier easily.
Easiest F tier, I was there when it all started. President Lincoln had just been shot, and Andrew came up to me, and I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "Damn, homie, I'm so screwed." It wasn't very inspirational.
Yes, hi, this is Donald-based Naruto Trump. Yes, indeed, the 45th president. Why, yes, I do sometimes call myself Mr. 45. How sweet of you to know that. Yes, well, you see, I'm calling on behalf of the current president, Mr. Joe Biden. Oh, yes, sister, you know it. The man has lost his mind. Yes, indeed, thank you for your help.
What the hell was that all about?
Oh, nothing. Just called the hospital. They're going to come and give Joe some special care. His mind is slipping, George.
Eat shit, Donald. I'm perfectly... Holy shit, how did you guys get in here? Why are there so many of you? What are you doing with that syringe?
Well, shit, I guess we'll have to call it there. I'm going to go play some Dark Souls 3, the superior Souls-like experience. Adios, Chads. Obama out.
What a bitch. I'm going to go play Elden Ring, the true superior Souls-like game. You got this outro, George. Donnie Bo Bonnie is going ghost. Adios.
Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing. It would make the Big W very happy. And we'll be one step closer to 1 billion subscribers. We got a long way to go, Chads. Come be a part of this wonderful shitpost of a channel. We love you all, pimps. Stay safe, stay chatted. And if there are any airplanes and towers in your life, well, you know what, never mind. Adios, Chads.